our good friend Scott Braddock, editor of quorumreport.com. Scott, good evening. How are you today?
Doing well, Chad. A beautiful day in Austin, Texas. Prop Q on Q went down.
Yeah.
And I was so bored with trying to analyze it because it was just that people don't want to see their taxes go up. That was it.
That's
I mean, even not that interesting.
Even in Austin, they don't want their taxes to go up. I mean, hey.
Yeah, right. That's the only thing that kind of sort of makes it interesting. But I had no question in my mind going to fail. Prop Q, for folks in Lubbock who don't know, it was city council and the mayor had put this proposition on the ballot asking for a tax increase here, and it just was not popular at all. Pushback from everybody, from conservatives, liberals, everything in between, driving around different neighborhoods. Nobody liked this thing. Last week, I was making a television appearance. And you know this, Chad, I hate being on TV.
Yes.
I'd much rather be on the radio with you. I have a face for a podcast, as you know. And the mayor, Kirk Watson, was the guest on this TV show right before me, so he was leaving the studio, and I didn't get a chance to really talk to him much, but I asked the TV producer, what his body language was like when they were asking about Prop Q, this tax increase, is it going to pass? And the producer just looked at me and laughed and said, "There's no way that's going to pass. There's no way the mayor thinks that's going to pass. It is going down in flames. It sure did." I do think on some of those things where it's a tax increase question like that on Prop Q in Austin, or bond issues by school districts that may go down when the economy is not great and certainly is perceived as not great by voters all over the place. Those things just become pocketbook issues, right? People think the price of everything is too high, and you're nickel and diming me. And no, I'm just going to say no, and that applies to people of all political stripes. And for as much as the leadership at the state capitol, the Republican leadership, wants to beat up on Austin or Houston or wherever else, we tend to take care of these things on our own here. They put it on the ballot. People said no. Let's go on down the road, and now I see all of these folks, some liberals and conservatives here in Travis County, who have been now saying that what we really need is an audit of city council. And so we'll see if there's a real push for that.
Very interesting. All right. Well, you got to hear the interview with Senator John Cornyn. One of the big things in that interview that he said is he feels pretty confident that he's going to get the endorsement of President Trump. I mean, is that bluster, or do you think he's got a chance of getting the endorsement?
Here's my immediate thought. When I heard him say it on the radio, I heard you tweet out that the interview was going to air at 5:35. So, of course, I went to kfyo.com to take a listen.
Very nice.
Right at that time at 5:30. You like that plug? So I turned it on. I'm listening, and most of it, Chad, I think you might agree, most of it just standard Republican stuff, right? Saying that Mamdani is a socialist and that he's going to be the face of the Democrats going into the next election cycle. We could talk about that. And some of the other things he was talking about with ending the filibuster, that's all D.C. talk and pretty standard at the moment with the shutdown going on. When he said that he was growing more confident about getting President Trump's endorsement, I listened very closely, and here's what caught my ear. He's talking on the radio about what I presume is a private conversation with the president, right? He said that they talked this morning, the two of them. It would be my speculation that the senior senator from Texas, who is a veteran office holder and campaigner, somebody who understands politics inside and out, he's not going to talk about a private conversation with the president unless the president's team is cool with that, right? He's not going to talk about that on the radio unless the White House would be cool with that. That's my guess. And so that would tell me that it's more than just bluster, that it's more than him just saying, hey, maybe I think I'll get the endorsement. And I've made my case to the president for why I should get the endorsement. He also said something in there about how the president's team must be telling Mr. Trump that Ken Paxton is a weak candidate and, among other things, could endanger down ballot Republicans, even if he might win the race anyway in November. But for him to basically out a private conversation with the president on the radio tells me that the White House must be cool with him talking about it, and that might also be some kind of a trial balloon for this chatter to get louder about whether President Trump will endorse, and then we'll see what kind of feedback comes back on that. Very interesting.
Well, and it was a very adamant, because I thought the same thing. I mean, Senator John Cornyn he's a very, folks, even if you don't like, even if you think he's a rhino, he's a smart guy. and he's not just going to throw something out there that isn't true, because he knows that would be bad. And for him to say that, and then immediately when I ask, you don't think there's any way Ken Paxton gets the endorsement? No. I mean, it was a very adamant. I mean, for John Cornyn to be that adamant about it, it tells me that there's a little bit more there.
Yeah, I think so. And, again, a potentially, and I think this is what he's alluding to, a potentially private conversation with the president. I would think that would be cleared by the White House, their political office, that the senator would float that out there. And I do think that what he's saying about Paxton, that I know there's a lot of supporters out there of Ken Paxton, of course, and he was made more popular by the impeachment. And I do know that some of the people who helped to orchestrate the impeachment would now tell you, a couple of years later now, they would tell you that what they really accomplished was making Paxton more popular with primary voters in the Republican Party. That they know that now. But I do think that Paxton's candidacy has always been sort of a long shot for a few reasons. And one of the main reasons is that it doesn't seem to me that the people who have been bankrolling Paxton's campaigns over the years are really thrilled about this idea that he's running for Senate instead of reelection. And you know the folks I'm talking about, primarily Tim Dunn, who's a billionaire from Midland, and of course has been the guy who led the charge to create Empower Texans, and now they call themselves different things, right? But Texas Scorecard and all of that. The guy who's been underwriting a lot of that sort of conservative activism in Texas, that very organized and professional activism, if you will. Tim Dunn was the guy who loaned Ken Paxton $1 million in 2014 when he was in a runoff against a guy named Dan Branch from Dallas when Paxton won that runoff to become Attorney General. None of it done, and the rest of those who have been, really paying the bills, politically, writing the campaign checks for Paxton seem thrilled about this. And I think a real tell on that is, of course, those guys could donate and figure out a way to bundle, donations for Paxton for a federal race. The tell on this was that Wes Hunt, who, as John Cornyn, the senator, pointed out, most people don't know who Hunt is, but Hunt was able to outraise Ken Paxton in that first report that we were looking at, where Hunt raised about $1.5 million to Paxton's nearly $1.3 million, something like that. And so, look, the Trump political team, they know that, and they know that Paxton may not have the staying power that he maybe originally thought when he announced for this. And I still do think, I'm just going to float this out there, Chad, because it's one of those things. I've learned to do this in my many years as a political analyst. If I say this now, it turns out to be right, I can take credit for it. But if it doesn't turn out to be right, people won't even remember I said it. It would be this, that there's still time for Paxton to just run for re-election. He could still do that. And you know what? All of these races could change. I mean, we still have some reason in Austin to think that potentially the Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, might not run for re-election. I'm watching that very close. Remember, he had a press conference, a month or two, whatever it was, 6 weeks ago, when he talked about the idea that he's for sure running for re-election, and he questioned why nobody believes him about that. Well, if he didn't run for re-election, let's just say that he didn't, that would scramble a lot of fields, right? That different people would run for lieutenant governor, different people would run for attorney general. Some people in that race now would switch over to the lieutenant governor's race. Some people running for comptroller might run for lieutenant governor instead. Everything could still be mixed up. So until the filing period is over, and by the way, it opens coming up this Saturday on the 8th, and it goes for 30 days until December 8th. Until that's over with, Chad, we don't really know what any of these races look like.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a very good point. Okay, let's take a look at what happened last night.
Yeah.
I mean, look, the constitutional amendments passing, I said very early on in the show, that doesn't shock me. No one should be shocked by that at all. Was there anything around the state that surprised you, or you went, that was an interesting result?
Well, the race that got my attention was this special election for a Texas Senate seat up in Tarrant County. You saw this. This is the seat that had been held by Senator Kelly Hancock, who is now the acting comptroller. And, Chad, you should never – I've been telling people this all day long. I always say it after special elections, especially special elections in an off year like this, the year before the midterm, which, this always happens. People try to read too much into it. I always try to remind people to not read too much into this stuff, but then I have to remind myself that people are going to do that anyway, so you still have to be ready to talk about it. So I looked at this race and I started pulling the numbers, and I had some of the best Republican political minds in the state helping me compile some of this information. And I think that the result there, where you had a Democrat leading the field in a deeply Republican part of the state. We're talking about the area around South Lake, which is very conservative, right? That whole area has sent some really conservative members of the legislature to Austin, and they have very conservative school boards and conservative local governments and all of that. In that area, they just aren't liberals. They don't vote that way. So in this three-person race where you had two Republicans and a Democrat, the Democrat was leading the field. Now, you might think, maybe that's no surprise since we're two Republicans that they would, split the vote. But get this, the last time that Senate seat was on the ballot in 2022, the Democrat running at that time, and that's in a midterm election, it's an off year, if you will. The Democrat at that time got 40%. Last night, the Democrat got 48%.
Yeah. That's
an 8-point swing toward the Democrats, right? And I made note of this on social media today. That should at least be concerning to the Republicans, not just in that area, but across the state. As far as an enthusiasm gap, listen to this. And this was what one of my Republican friends sent to me as he was going through the numbers. For the final numbers in Senate District 9, the Democrat got, and follow this closely, the Democrat got 34.9, almost 35% of what Vice President Harris got in that same exact Senate district last year. The top Republican got about 18% of the votes that President Trump got in that Senate district. Now you have to add that. You have to add all of that info to this. The Democrat had no money to spend. Nothing. I mean, just nothing of significance. But millions of dollars were spent on behalf of the Republican, only to finish with that result. So an 8-point swing toward the Democrats in an area like that should at least be concerning. Now, I would say this to temper that, which is it was a unique race for sure. You had two Republicans going at it, spending millions of dollars. By the time by the time all the dust clears in this race, Chad, it could be that as much as about $6 to $7 million was spent by those Republican campaigns or allied organizations trying to help the candidates. That would be almost like a governor's race in some states. That's a lot of money. Yeah. And you had these two Republicans just eating each other alive, really beating each other up, just going full bore against each other. And as a Republican friend said to me this afternoon, he said, look, since there's only two Republicans and both of them are going so negative and there wasn't a third Republican for Republican voters to kind of flow to a different candidate if they didn't like all that negativity, that naturally meant that the Republican vote might have been suppressed a little bit by that, right? Some people may have just opted to not vote in the race. But I'll tell you, that's definitely one to watch. As far as any of the constitutional amendments, no real surprises there. We talked a little bit about the water amendment. That I think the fact that there was some more attention on that on your show and in other places probably helped get that resolved. But as far as anything else around the state, nothing all that surprising, and I do think that there will be a lot of overanalyzing of that Senate race that I mentioned, but that's what happens when you have, an off-year election and there's really nothing else on the board to look at.
Yeah. Let's see. I thought it was also you had sent out. Hang on. Let me see where I saw it. I think I saw it in my email that that you had put out there from the hot buzz that that was out there. And this is kind of a behind the scenes deal, but I think it was you were talking. It was about that race and about the kind of the Las Vegas Sands, not really spending a lot of money, but not really getting a lot of return when it comes to going up against Dan Patrick.
They didn't get much return on that, and as you know, they have spent millions of dollars on their lobby efforts as well as campaign efforts. They've pushed in so much money in that race that, looking at it from just a traditional politics standpoint, a traditional analyst standpoint, you would think, well, they have got to change things up. But one of my friends who has paid a lot of attention to Sands, and of course it's the big gaming company that is operated in Las Vegas and in China, and would like to set up shop here in Texas, and that's why they're spending all this money. They have so much money that they can think generationally about this stuff. They have so much money that if 10 years from now they finally can open a casino resort in Texas, Chad, they'll make back all the money they spent on trying to get it done. They'll make it all back in a Final Four weekend, right? I mean, that's how much money that they make. And you think about it this way, too. It's the same ownership of the Dallas Mavericks right now. And, of course, they traded away Luka, which was seen as the craziest trade ever earlier this year. And, of course, the fans melting down in Dallas. And that ownership, they don't care about that. They're going to be thinking about, what they do with that organization going forward, thinking generationally. And in the moment, they don't care if people are really pissed at them. I would say, must be nice.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not how the rest of us are able to operate. But I would think that at some point they would have to, from a business standpoint, take a look at what they're doing and figure out if it's the right thing.
Tell folks what they can find at quorumreport.com.
We've got your state government covered in real time, quorumreport.com. Also, a special edition of Quorum Report Radio. Our podcast will come your way in the morning on Thursday. Just make sure you're subscribed to Quorum Report Radio on your favorite podcast app. It'll pop right up there on your phone bright and early. Thanks, Chad.
Very good. Thank you, Scott. That's Scott Braddock, editor of quorumreport.com.